It's Monday, September 11th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight we begin Origins Week, bringing you the origin stories of the fabled geekly interests of Rim and Scott.
Let's do this. So today, work was crazy, and usually work is nothing.
Really? So did you do work?
No. Well, I guess. I did do things with my body to help the company in a way.
What, did you move furniture around?
No, but I basically I get to work, and my plan today at work was to go in, play DDR at work. I had my DDR pad in the trunk.
Yeah, you had this crazy idea.
The hatch.
Yeah, bring in the DDR pad to work, which would be brilliant.
It would have been brilliant, except today, of all days, there was people at my work. Oh my God. What they were doing is they were taking the furniture out of the office and they're sending it somewhere, God knows where, and they're going to get new furniture, and hopefully after they get new furniture, they'll get new people, besides just me. But today I had to clear off computers from a bunch of desks so that they could take the furniture away.
So you didn't bring the DDR pad in?
I didn't bring DDR pad in because there's people there. They would have seen it.
So? You've done other things with your body before.
Yeah, but people weren't there seeing it. Anyway.
How do you know? How do you know there isn't some security camera that is in the ceiling that you don't know about?
Because I know.
How do you know?
I know.
You can make real tiny cameras.
I'm 100% sure. Anyway, then I had to go to my parents' house to fix their computer, which was mad broken. And let me tell you, this computer is crazy broken. Crazy broken. Like, you'll turn it on, and it'll work. Then you'll turn it on again, and you'll get a kernel panic right away about it'll say, like, the kernel tarball is in an improper compressed format. You'll reboot it again, and it'll start uncompressing the kernel, and then give a different kernel panic about not being able to mount the VFS.
Now, it seems like many of the computers you've given to your parents have always had problems, and you keep having to do things to them.
Yeah, and then, check this out. So I try to boot an Ubuntu CD on the thing, and it starts to boot the CD, and then gives a kernel panic from a CD. From a CD. I think the last computer they had, the IDE controller broke. And the one they have now, I'm pretty sure the IDE controller broke.
Now,
so I'm thinking that they have some sort of power problems, and I'm going to buy them a UPS because I ordered them a new motherboard, CPU, and RAM. By the way, the motherboard and CPU RAM I got them was a 1.6 gigahertz Sempron with 512 megabytes of RAM with a motherboard that has a built-in GeForce 6100 micro ATX, 64 bits processor, for $174.
That's faster than either of our computers.
That's faster than any computer that any of my friends own. Period. Hands down. And it was $174 for the motherboard, CPU, RAM, video card, sound card, network card, because it's all rolled into one.
So who was it in the forums who thought that building a $1,000 computer was a good idea?
I don't know, but they were dumbass. I mean, this thing, granted, this thing has an onboard video card, and it's a 6100, and the one in my computer is a 5900, and you're not going to play Half-Life 2 at really good speeds. I mean, it'll be barely playable. However, you can just, for a few $100, slap, a newer GeForce in the PCI Express slot, and you are good to go.
You could spend $500 on a video card and still be cheaper than that $1,000 computer.
Yeah, not only that, but, the Sempron, not the fastest processor, but 1.6 gigahertz 64-bit processor is enough for anything you're going to do. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And I only got 512 megs of RAM, but to double that, add $50. So $250 plus a video card, and you're set.
Anyway, the UPS is probably a good idea. I mean, we UPSified our entire house.
I'm beginning to think that's the problem, because they had this really strange old ghetto power strip that was mad shady.
Why did you let them use that?
I don't know. I didn't really have much say in that matter. I pretty much just brought a computer to their house, and it was plugged in.
And you didn't look at what it was plugged into?
In those days, I didn't pay much attention. So I'm going to replace their motherboard, CPU, and RAM, see what I can do with the old motherboard, CPU, and RAM. I mean, I bought this computer for them back in the day for $400, and they never gave me the $400. So it's kind of like... Well,
you know what? They did help you, go to school and pay for most of your upbringing.
Whose side are you on here? That's what they say. Anyway, the point is that I'm going to fix this computer up, and computers are wicked cheap. And also, this computer is strangely broken. Woo!
Better call Randy. There's a ghost in there.
I know. It's a non-deterministic computer. What's the world coming to?
We better get skepticality on it.
I know. It's craziness.
All right, so anyway, in the actual news, Wikipedia. Now, there's been a lot lately about how Google and Yahoo and Microsoft have been kowtowing in various ways to the oppressive regime in China.
Yeah, it seems like your choices are kowtow, which is looked down upon, but then you can do business in China where there's 1 billion people to pay you.
Yep.
Or you can not kowtow, which is good, but then 1 billion people in China. It's like, it's like what's better? Not to influence those people at all or to influence them in a censored way. It's
Now, kind of like the way I always like to break up the way France, Britain, Spain, and Portugal treated natives they ran across. It seems like the companies here, you can break it down the same way. At the bottom end, you have Yahoo, who pretty much just openly collaborate, helping the Chinese find dissidents that they can then torture and kill or whatever they do to them. Then you have Google, who allows the censorship and does all the censoring that China wants, but on any time something is censored, Google says, hey, we censored something. And they only censor the Chinese one. Then there's Wikipedia. That is the news today. Wikipedia has given China the big double deuce and said, we're not going to censor shit for anybody, and you can take that however you want. China responded by banning Wikipedia from China.
Well, see, here's the problem, is that if there's no Chinese people on Wikipedia, then the Chinese Wikipedia won't be edited very much, and therefore won't have much information to be censored, and no one will see it. So it basically makes, they might as well not have the Chinese Wikipedia if they're not going to censor.
Well, I think they blocked normal Wikipedia too. That's the thing. Because there's... Now, the one thing I found interesting, and a lot of people on Slashdot pointed this out, was why doesn't China let Wikipedia do whatever it wants and just edit Wikipedia to talk about how great communism is? There are more people... The Chinese government can hire more people to edit it the way they want it than Wikipedia could have, preventing it from being edited.
But what Wikipedia can do is prevent it from being edited by China.
Yeah, but not long-term. There are no long-term protections in Wikipedia. There are short-term protections for things like abuse. Like, if 1 million people suddenly decide to change an article about something stupid, like they try to add bananas to an article.
Well, doesn't every IP address in China begin with, some range of numbers that they can just block?
Tor.
Yeah.
There are many ways around that.
But do you think... See, this is the thing. Governments like China don't seem to understand that Tor exists and that their citizens are using it. How are they going to know to use it for their advantage?
Of course, Germany recently has been attacking Tor.
Oh, yeah, they took a bunch of Tor servers.
Yeah, on the auspicious grounds that child pornography might be involved in some way. Therefore, we're taking all these people's computers.
Even though these computers don't actually have child pornography on them.
Not only that, but if their argument were, we're going to seize these computers, look at the logs, and track down the child porn, while I would disagree with parts of that on fundamental, freedom issues, at least it would make sense.
See, here's the thing.
They're trying to do good, but here's the thing. There are no logs. Seizing those computers can do nothing because there's absolutely no way from seizing one computer to find out who connected to that Tor server. That's how Tor works.
Yeah. The thing is, what would be cool is if I had some sort of Tor server and there was a way to tell from the logs who was a child pornographer or whatever.
Oh, I'd turn him in.
Yeah, I would have no problem just setting up, here's an anonymous thing. Everyone can be anonymous on the internet, but I'll know if you're doing child porn. That's the only thing that will show up is if you're a child pornographer. Then your anonymity will be, destroyed. That way, child pornographers wouldn't be able to use it.
The problem here is just the collateral damage, because it seems like whenever governments try to tackle this problem of child porn, and while it is definitely a problem, it's a very bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how widespread of a problem it is that the collateral damage of all these measures governments take to prevent it are worth it.
Well, here's what bothers me, right, is that they're doing all these things, to stop child porn and taking things down that are mostly used for non-child porn. I mean, I'm sure there's a torrent somewhere of a child porn. There has to be, just because the internet exists. But attacking BitTorrent because someone made a BitTorrent of a child porn is not good. But if you go on IRC, on certain IRC networks, at least when I used to go on IRC to go to I would go to some room about a video game to get a help, or I'd go to some room about Linux to ask someone a question.
You used IRC for any reason other than finding illegal
That's
binaries?
the only reason I used IRC. And you would go in there, and the top 100 rooms would all be child porn, kiddie, XXXE.
Well, you know what the secret there is? Every one of those rooms was full of nothing but FBI agents.
It could be. But the point is, even if those rooms aren't just full of FBI agents, why don't they just? There's so many obvious. Hi, I'm a child pornographer. I look at child porn.
Well, remember,
guys
we were
on
at
the internet.
RIT and they caught that kid.
Yeah, there was some kid who was on my floor and he was stupid and he didn't know how to secure his computer, so he accidentally was sharing a folder on his machine on the local network area. And it had child porn in it, and they busted him.
Yeah, because the way RIT works is the network is pretty much the Wild West. So if your computer is in any way compromised and you go to RIT, everyone else in the school, other than maybe the frat boys, will be in your computer rooting around looking for whatever fun stuff. And usually people
We printed a goatsy out of some random shared printer.
Yes, we did.
Huh.
Anyway, yeah, he was reported to the police like 100 times from all the people who found that. But anyway, in the whole Wikipedia thing, Jimmy Wales, the Wikipedia guy, his quote was, quote, "We occupy a position in the culture that I wish Google would take up, which is that we stand for the freedom of information." And now the one thing I would say is, everyone says, oh, this is great, Wikipedia is standing up against China, and Wikipedia is the only service that has the balls to tell China they're not going to censor. But at the same time, I think Google's policy is also equally valid, because the thing they basically go after is that, all right, the choice is either no one in China has any access to Google at all, and they lose all of that information, or they will get access to everything we can give them access to, and we will tell them straight up that the government is censoring everything else.
Yeah, that's pretty much,
The other difference is that Google and Yahoo have a financial interest. Wikipedia has no financial interest. So there is almost zero pressure on Wikipedia to deal with China or not deal with China. They could care less. It wouldn't affect them at all. If Google doesn't deal in China, that is going to be a serious long-term economic consequence.
So what we really need is someone like Microsoft to not deal in China.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the failings of open source software, is that you can just use it in
Well, remember, you could have GPL, but then have a clause in there that says, accept the Chinese government.
I think that's something actually that they're talking about for GPL3, if I recall correctly, is they're saying you can't use this if you're a horrible, repressive government.
There's also an anti-military clause that's been propping up now and again.
I don't know about that.
Well,
It shouldn't be used, because you could use Linux on like soldiers' laptops. And
yeah, but
that's
what if
cool.
someone who made an application decided that they didn't want soldiers to use it, or they didn't want militaries to use it?
They can add that to their own license.
No, they use the GPL plus this add-on.
Yeah,
It's like a mod to the GPL, a plugin.
yeah. It's just kind of like, I don't know.
Well,
I agree with if your government partakes in genocide, you can't use my software to aid your genocide. That way you don't end up being IBM, where everyone's like, oh, IBM helped Nazis. But at the same time, if some legitimate army wants to use your software.
But what's the difference? The question is, do you, when you create something that is ephemeral, just bits, you create some data or a program.
You arrange some bits.
What are the rights you have regarding how it is used? Because the GPL basically says that I like other people to use my stuff, but I reserve all these rights, and I can fuck you if you violate them.
Well, it's mostly, by default, all rights are reserved. So you're saying I am not reserving a whole mess of rights and only reserving
so
these
that
few.
means I have the right to restrict anything I make in any way I want. So I could just say, no one named Bob, no women, and no people with one eye are allowed to use my media player.
Go for it. That'd be awesome. Oh, that would be so cool. We should make software like that. So, yet again, they have released the list of the top 50 most expensive AdWords. Now, if you don't know how Google AdWords works...
Mesothelioma is worth a lot of money and nothing else matters.
Well, mesothelioma was worth a lot of money. But
oh, really?
The way it works is, let's say you want to put an advertisement on Google, in the Google ads. You have to pay money for every click. So let's say I want to get 100 visitors to my website. I have to pay 100 times the amount of money depending on what words I want. So let's say I have a video game website, and the word video game costs $5, and I want 100 visitors. I have to pay $500. Then Google will put my ad up and keep putting it up until there are 500 clicks on it.
Now, there are numerous problems with this. Mainly, one thing, and actually I've done this before, a lot of people had little movements where, say you don't like chiropractors. Google for chiropractor or back pain, and every time you see a chiropractor's ad word, click on it. It took almost no effort from you, and you just cost them a reasonable amount of money.
Yep. And if sometimes if the AdWords are on Google, Google likes that because Google makes money. But if the advertisements appear on some other websites, like you'll go to some your friend's webcomic and it has Google ads on it. If you click on that, not only does that subtract one click from the person advertising, but it gives the person with the website money. So anyway, this is a list of the 50 most expensive AdWords. So if you're an advertiser and you want to advertise, specific words, some cost more than others. Very popular words cost a lot, and very unpopular words don't cost so much.
So what words are currently winning?
The currently most expensive in terms of average cost per click ad word is school loan consolidation.
Now, that makes a lot of sense because interest rates are going up, and a lot of people who don't know a lot about how loans work really think that consolidating their student loans is a good idea in case the interest rates go higher.
Yep. And there's a lot of spam going on about school loan consolidation.
God, you wouldn't believe how many letters we get in the mail that look legitimate, like they act like they're from the federal government, but they're actually just student loan consolidation bullshit scams.
Yeah. I mean, God, what... It's basically, when you think about it, this is sort of a good system and sort of a bad system. In that, one, horrible spammers are able to advertise, and that's not so good. I mean, I would be much happier if they just said...
Scott, they can advertise anyway. Freedom of speech.
I know, but it's like, if I was running an ad system and someone came to me to buy ads, and they said, yeah, I want to run this, scam ad, I would say, no, you can't run the scam ad. However... it is sort of a self-filtering system because if a scam gets popular, it gets very expensive. I mean, if you want to run an ad about school loan consolidation, you have to pay $69.16 on average for one click.
That means
so if you want to scam 100 people, you have to pay at least $6,900.
Not only that, I can cost you $69 just by clicking on something in my web browser.
Yep. So it is sort of a self-fixing system, and
the thing
someone ends up paying a shit ton of money.
The system is basically dying anyway. Google is looking for a way to get away from this system entirely because they keep getting sued about false clicks, like the ones I was talking about.
Yeah, click fraud is a huge problem and a topic for another day. But the point is that the Google ad system is where most of Google's money comes from, and that's why they're so powerful and huge. And this is a pretty good insight into how the system works if you don't understand.
Not only that, it's a good insight into what's going on in the world, because before, mesothelioma was the number one thing, because there were a lot of lawyers who were basically scamming old people who may or may not have had this cancer that is caused partially by exposure to asbestos, and getting them to try to sue the people who may have exposed them to it. And while the lawsuits would often be lost, the lawyer would get a bunch of money from the old person. And if the lawsuit won, the lawyer got a whole bunch of money from the old person and from the company. It was win-win, unless you're the old person with mesothelioma.
Yeah, if you just look at the list of the most expensive AdWords, it's basically, hey, I wonder what the most popular scams are going on. Oh, there they are.
Anyway, things of the day.
Ooh, I got a good one.
I had a good one. But because of the fact that my computer is old and busted and it's steady state, meaning I'm not upgrading anything on it until I buy a new one. Also the fact that the Flash players in Linux don't work so well. Firefox crashed, and I couldn't find this thing again.
So what are you going to do?
Well, I might set myself on fire and jump off of Minas Tirith. See, now, because the thing of the day, which was a fat, scary guy who made a video yelling at people on 4chan for messing with him on the internets. Which was...
You got punned.
This guy got owned in a way...
Owned.
You got owned.
Okay.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go with an old classic that I can't believe we haven't talked about on the show. I'm sure I've referenced it. Many times you've probably heard me say something and you wondered what the hell I was talking about. There's a good chance I was talking about Lord of the Rings on the go.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is something that has brought belly laughs from hundreds of people in and around the front row crew for many years.
Denethor.
It has brought so many inside jokes into our lives. To this day, if I look at Lord of the Rings on the go, within 2 pages of it, I will be laughing out loud even if I try not to.
So what is Lord of the Rings on the go?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Lord of the Rings on the go it wasn't a Photoshop Friday, but it was a comedy goldmine on Something Awful years ago. Like pretty much right after the third Lord of the Rings movie came out, The Return of the King. And what it was is...
That was years ago.
Yeah, we're old.
Yeah, we are. Okay, go on.
Yeah, well, my favorite thing, if you want to remember how old you are, The Nightmare Before Christmas came out more than 10 years ago.
Yep, it sure did.
So this is basically, Something Awful has the amazing Photoshop contests that are always hilarious. This was like that, except instead of making good Photoshops, you were encouraged to make bad Photoshops. Not only bad Photoshops, but bad Photoshops involving cars and the Lord of the Rings.
Huh.
Now, it's hard to explain the humor. You just have to look at it. But imagine, like, a car, and it's crashed into another car, and you see a badly photoshopped Aragorn sitting in it, and then underneath, you see Pippin yelling, "He was stabbed by a 4-door blade."
That was a good one.
Yes, it was. And of course, the triumphal moment of this entire comedy goldmine, though there are hundreds of them, like, "That's no Orkhorn. One does not simply drive into Mordor." But there's this... Now, you all remember the scene in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. This is a spoiler. Denethor sets himself on fire and jumps off of Minas Tirith to his death.
Yep.
And despite the fact that it was a very serious scene, it ended up being hilarious in the movie, partly because Denethor, the way the cinematography went, he had to run like 2 minutes to get to that cliff and jump off of it.
We had to go all the way from the castle, around the tree, down the walkway, and off the cliff.
And they show it to you just... Now, the Photoshop here is there is a Pinto, as in the car. It is
the one that is famous for setting on fire.
It is on fire. Denethor is in it, as in his face is there in the driver's seat, and he's screaming, and he is also on fire, and it is flying off of Minas Tirith.
Lol.
If you want to laugh
It's much funnier if you look at it.
Yes.
And you know that you get the joke. It's sort of like if you don't know Lord of the Rings and you don't know cars, even just a little bit you need to know cars, but you got to know Lord of the Rings, and then this will be funny. If you don't know Lord of the Rings, you're not going to get any of this. You're going to go, what?
You've also got to know a lot of those funny old internet picture cliches, like the guy who was
really?
Yeah, really. Like there's this guy who was a car, and he stacked too much stuff on it, and the suspension is failing. And of course, there's the potato joke. Anyway, it is hilarious. It is old. If you haven't seen it before, welcome to the internet. If you don't get it, welcome to the internet.
So my thing of the day here, I like a whole lot. It's called Unix, the whole hog. HOLEHAWG. And you'll see why that's...
Well, I guess if you make someone a eunuch, then there's really just a hole there.
It's Unix, the whole hog of operating systems by Neil Stephenson, author of Snow Crash and Diamond Age and Cryptonomicon and all those good books that everyone who's a geek likes. And this is a short essay that you can read in a few minutes comparing this particular drill, like a drill, as in it makes holes in wood and other materials, that is made by the Milwaukee Tool Company called the Whole Hog. And this drill is pretty much the motherfucker of drills. In the piece here, he tells a story about a guy who was drilling into the side of a house. The bit on the drill got stuck, and instead of the, drill going dugga 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 or stopping or anything like that, the guy was still holding onto it, spun the guy around holding the drill. This is a motherfucker of a drill. And basically, the whole thing is using this drill as a metaphor for how the Unix operating system is, and trying to explain to normal people why people who use Unix are the way they are and why Unix is the way it is. And I just want to read a short paragraph about it here. A smaller tool is dangerous too, but for a completely different reason. It tries to do what you tell it to, and fails in some way that is unpredictable and most always undesirable. But the whole hog is like the genie of the ancient fairy tales, who carries out his master's instructions literally and precisely and with unlimited power, often with disastrous unforeseen consequences. And that is what Unix is like. So everyone should read this because it's hilarious, and especially because now that I know about this drill, I kind of want this drill.
Well, like, think about it. If you're in Unix and you type rm-rf ** and you forget the *.* or you've meant to type something, you type something else, you're fucked. It's over.
Game
That's the end.
over.
Because it does exactly what you wanted it to do.
With unlimited power and unforeseen consequences.
It does what you told it to do, not what you wanted it to do.
I know. That's exactly the point of this piece. Is he says how this drill is such a powerful, incredibly dangerous, monster of a drill that you can drill anything with it. But if it fails to drill, that's your fault. And he compares it to, he compares Windows and Macintosh to like power drills you buy in Home Depot that are basically crap compared to the whole hog. But with those, you can't really screw up because they're nice, homeowner drills.
But anyway, today, being Monday and being a new week, we were debating what to talk about. And we realized we hadn't done a theme week in a while.
Uh-oh, theme week.
And there's an idea we'd been kicking around for a while, and we decided this would be the perfect week to do it for a number of reasons, but we decided to do our origin stories.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, not the physical origin of the Front Row Crew, which we've already done, but instead the origins of all of our geekeries. Now, how did we get into computers? How did we get into anime? How did we find manga or video games or the secret topic we'll talk about on Thursday?
How did we become so skilled and knowledgeable in so many different areas?
See, that's Scott's view. I'm looking at it more as, how did I become interested in this?
See, I think the thing is that for me personally, I'm interested in things that I have skills in, or I build skills in things I'm interested in, so they kind of go hand in hand.
What about race car driving? You have no race car driving skills, and you're not building any.
Or do I, Mr. Go-Kart loser?
One, those were Wildwood go-karts, where the only determiner in who wins is who got the one car that doesn't constantly backfire.
And is it any different in F1? Is it?
I don't know. If Kimi and Alonso were in the same car.
Well, next year Kimi's going to be in a Ferrari and Alonso's going to be in a McLaren, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Now, I was also inspired to this partly because in the forums lately, there seemed to be a lot of recurring threads of, how did you get into anime? What was your first anime?
Yep. So we're going to cover that Wednesday.
Yep.
But today we're going to cover how do we get into the computer gig, because that's our jobs.
So anyway, today, computers, obviously we're interested in computers. We're geeks. We use computers a lot. And it seems like a lot of people really take computers for granted, or just, they're tools and nothing more, which I take that view to a point. But at the same time, I can remember precisely how I became interested in computers and how I became good at them.
Well, how did you?
Oh, so you want me to go first?
Oh, I could go first also, because I also precisely remember my early interactions with computerized devices.
Yeah, well, very simply, I always wanted to get on the internet. I always wanted to have a computer. I'd seen war games, and I was absolutely convinced that I could do all of those things with a computer.
Aha.
And then when I got to middle school, we had no computers in my elementary school. It was a Catholic school. We had like one Apple computer and one IBM computer that they never let me touch. But then when I got to 5th grade and I went to public school, they had a lot more money, and they had a whole bunch of like Windows 3.1.1 computers with a terrible word processor on them, in addition to a whole bunch of terrible, terrible games. And I remember that I had to read this book called The Bear Stone. It was called The Bear Stone. And it was about
Bear Stone.
It was about this Indian kid, as a reservation Indian kid. And I had to write a book report on it. And because I was one of the smart kids in the class, they let like the 5 smart kids go to the computer lab and use this word processor to type their book report instead of writing it by hand.
Ooh.
So I made this book report, and I put a bunch of clip art in it, and I used 3 different fonts, and I thought it was really awesome. And I made it, and there was this spell checker, and that was amazing to me. And I printed it out on the special printer they had at the school, and I brought it home, and my grandpa is a newspaper guy, as in a typesetter. He spent most of his life working in old school newspapers, like manual mechanical printing presses. And I showed this to him, and he said something to the effect of, "I'm glad I'm retiring because my job is now obsolete."
Nah.
And he took that book report and he brought it to his work and he showed it to people. And he basically said, "Look what my grandson did. He can do all the work that we do."
Nah. Wow.
But then, I mean, still, there was no internet. There was no online. I didn't have a computer. It wasn't until I joined the computer club at my middle school. Now,
Oh no.
don't be under any illusions. The computer club at my middle school was quite
Oregon
literally
Trail, the club.
every Monday. We would hang out after school in the computer lab with the nerdy guy who ran it, playing Oregon Trail
Yeah, that's right.
and Scorched Earth.
In Carmen, San Diego.
Nope, no Carmen San Diego.
Aw.
We had and Scorched Earth and Stunts 4D Racing.
Oh.
That was the best freaking game.
Okay.
And LHX, which was a really good 286 helicopter fighting game.
All right.
And just even then, I didn't know anything about computers. I barely knew how they worked. I knew to type scorch.bat and I could play Scorched Earth.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew that the bigger the resolution was, the smaller things were on the screen, but I didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And I often broke the computers.
Oh.
But I bothered my parents I wanted a computer, Can I have a computer, Dad? 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 And one day my parents decided that, and well, this happened often. We didn't have a lot of money, but I was a kid and I didn't know better, so I thought we had a lot of money. So I'd always ask for things like, "Give me a piano. I need a piano. I need a computer." And I usually got them. And eventually my parents bought me a computer. So we went and we bought a Packard Bell 486 SX2.
A Hackard hell.
That was my first computer. It came with Windows 3.1.1.
Oh, for work groups?
Well, it came with Windows 3.1 on it, but it came with the disks to upgrade that to 3.1.1 for workgroups.
Whoa, work groups.
Which was the first Windows that had network capabilities that worked.
Yeah, but they were kind of useless.
They didn't actually work because I didn't have a LAN or anything.
They weren't
I had
useful.
Hyperterminal. But I got this computer.
I'll talk.
It came also... Windows was not the primary operating system on this computer, nor was DOS. They were both there, but over both of them, like running on top of Windows, which itself was running on top of DOS, was Packard Bell Navigator.
Ooh.
Oh my God, did that make me hate computers. It was the worst thing ever, and it didn't make sense. But I eventually started using DOS and learning how to do things, and I started learning how to actually, install programs correctly by asking people and trial and error and breaking things and fixing things. And eventually I learned how to get on BBSs by dialing a phone number at Hyperterminal. Now I guess I'll stop there and let Scott tell his first bit before I go on about the rest, because I'm sure we can talk a lot about our first internet experiences.
That's a good place right there. So I guess I kind of knew about computers before kindergarten. Like, I'd seen them on TV, and I had an Atari 2600 at some point, and, all that stuff. So I was definitely interested in technologies and stuff. And, if you had put a computer near me, I would have been like, ooh, 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 ooh. But it wasn't until kindergarten where I actually got at one. Is in my school, elementary school, every single classroom in the school, or at least the majority of them, had an Apple II in them somewhere. And there was a lab or two that was basically a room full of Apple IIs. And, I didn't get very many opportunities to actually touch the Apple II. It just kind of sat there looking at you. And I remember always looking at it like, I want to play with that. I want to play with that. When am I going to get to play with that? And day after day, kindergarten's a half day. So, what chance are you going to get? They eventually let me play with it a few times. And, all I remember from elementary school was that I pretty much used the Apple IIs and later on Macintoshes all throughout elementary school, in school, and every chance I could. And we mostly played Oregon Trail and this other really good game with Dr. Livingston, and you had to find him, I presume, and all sorts of other fun games. But the one thing I remember the most was that teachers would always slowly... word munchers. Fucking word munchers, man. That was the shit. They would always slowly explain to everyone exactly how to use the computer. They'd be like, all right, everyone, push down. All right, everyone, push enter. And I just be like, I just looked at it, and it made sense. I'm like, there are arrows. That thing is highlighted. I push the number of what I want to do. I push enter to make things go. I'm all set. Well,
that seems to be the common thread among, geeks who know about computers versus people who don't, is that we didn't have any inherent skill or anything. We just weren't afraid to dick around with the computer, break it, freak out, try to fix it, and just constantly poke at it and try to figure out why things broke.
Yeah, I remember I was messing around with like Word Muncher's debug menus and stuff, and switching disks out and trying different things, and and everyone else seemed to be pretty uncomfortable with me fooling around. I guess because those things cost a lot of money.
Oh
in those
God!
days.
When we brought the computer home, my parents were like, the whole family was standing around it like it was fire, and we were cavemen. And we've got it on, and it's sitting there in Packard Bell Navigator, and my parents are like, "So what do we use it for?" And I was like, "I'll handle this." And I sat down, and I knew probably 1% more about that computer than my family. But because of that 1%, I was God to them about it. But yet they were afraid I was going to break it. So they'd tell me to do something. But then when I started to move the mouse around, they'd yell at me, "Don't break it. Don't break it. Stop that. Stop that." I was like, "Well, you want me to do it or not?" And
yeah. Anyway, so in elementary school, I got a lot of Apple II skills. And in the summer, a couple summers, I forget which ones, I went the local school system had like a summer program where you could like take 2 classes. And basically you spent half your day doing one thing and half your day doing another thing. And then lunch in the middle. So I would go there, and I would always choose gym and computers. Because I would go, and I would spend half my day playing dodgeball, and then spend half my day playing Oregon Trail. But I also learned Logo. I was programming from the start, bitches.
I remember Logo.
I'm moving that turtle around like a nobody's business.
I turned the turtle into a helicopter, and I used that instead.
Oh, no. You got to use the classic turtle. I mean, anyway, I was having the turtle solve mazes and stuff all on his own and shit like that. I knew what I was doing.
I was mostly getting really, really good at Stunts 4D racing.
Yeah, and then in middle school, I think around the time I was 13, we got, finally, a computer in our house, a 486, a spectacle, graphics, and sound.
Yep, we both had 486s, but Scott had a DX.
It was an IBM Aptiva. It had a 100 megahertz 486 DX4 processor with 16 megabytes of RAM.
I had 4.
Well, it started out with 8, and we upgraded it to 16.
We started with 4, and for like $200, upgraded it to 8.
It was like for a lot of money, we upgraded it to 16. Yeah, it started out with 8 megabytes. We upgraded it to 16. Now, this thing, it came with Windows 3.1, regular Windows 3.1, but it also came with OS2 Warp.
I have a copy of the final version of OS2 Warp.
Now, let me say, OS2 Warp was actually kind of good. The problem is that there wasn't OS2 Warp native software besides what came with the computer. So we used the OS2 Warp native software sometimes, but most of the time, I wanted to play DOS games. That was pretty much the purpose of this computer, was DOS games and a few Windows 3.1 games and printing out things for school.
We won't get into games, but good God, did I have an intricate series of batch scripts that would run the various games I had and the boot disks I needed. Because I needed a boot disk to play Doom 2.
Yep. So eventually, I rebooted the computer into, DOS Windows 3.1 mode, which I don't now understand is a dual boot and how that works. And we kept it that way most of the time, so the DOS games worked, and we used Windows, and OS2 eventually faded. And then Windows 95 came out, and I learned how to format a hard drive and install Windows 95. And then we got AOL and Netscape.
See, the internet is the fun part, and we won't dwell long. We don't want to go long in this episode or get into all the various tangents we could follow, but the internet was always this mysterious thing to me, because I always heard about it, the internet. But no one because I didn't know anyone who knew about computers, could give me a straight answer as to what it was or how I could connect to it. I knew that there was Prodigy and CompuServe and AOL, but I didn't know which one of those was the internet. I thought that those were separate, and they kind of were back then. Being actually on the internet back then was not something we could really do easily. And we ended up getting Prodigy Classic.
Oh, my friend had that for his IBM PS1.
With my 2400 baud modem that was so slow I couldn't even save my game in Mad Maze.
Wow.
I used to play Magic the Gathering in chat rooms on Prodigy. And a little bit of trivia, my first screen name ever was Origins. I got it because there's a book on evolution that was sitting on top of our computer desk called Origins something 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 something.
Wow, that's kind of crazy.
Though my parents used that name too for a while, and so did my brother, because we had like one handle for the whole house, and then eventually I figured out that I could set up different accounts for everybody. But the funny story here is when we got internet access. We got WoW, which is a little known. It was the first unlimited access dial-up internet, and it was really cheap, and that's probably why it went out of business real quick. But we got the internet. I bugged my parents, and we got a better computer, and we got a 33.6 modem.
Holy shit.
And then I dialed into WoW, and I was on the internet, and I opened up Netscape, and the first thing I ever did on the internet was type into the search bar in, I don't know what search engine I was in, I think it was the WoW search, quote, bomb making instructions, quote.
Oh no.
And my parents who were standing behind me said, my uncle was there too, and he said something to the effect of, I figured that's what he would search for. And I pretty much spent the first month looking for the most subversive things I could find.
Yeah.
And I didn't find a lot because the internet wasn't actually so happening back then.
Yeah. Basically, for me, the internet, like, I wasn't quite sure what the deal was at all. Like, I kind of vaguely understood that the computer was going to connect to something to get more computer action. And, like, you know, information coming from somewhere into the computer. But I didn't really get it. Like, eventually it was like, oh shit, telephone lines. I get it. Because my friend had an IBM PS1 with Prodigy Classic, and he would, you know, they would call another computer on the phone and do all this Prodigy stuff. And I'd be like, oh, it's just this program that lets you do all these cool things. And the OS2 Warp had an icon in it that said Information Superhighway with a little folder. And a picture of a car and a highway. And I was like, oh, if only I could get that to work. But we had a 14.4 modem in the computer. It came with it. But we didn't have a phone line, and we never hooked it up. Until later, we eventually got AOL and hooked it up. And around that time, I was, you know, understanding how this thing worked. And, you know, I was minimizing AOL and opening Netscape. And I was disconnecting it from AOL and dialing into the local library with Hyperterminal to check if there were books.
I was dialing into all sorts of wares things as I discovered there were a lot of wares BBSs about.
Yeah, I didn't quite figure out the wares. I was mostly downloading sharewares and then deleting them.
Funny story about wares. I'll talk about this more on gaming day probably, but the first games I got for the computer, other than the ones my parents bought right away, like with our second computer, the Pentium 200, we bought 2 games with it. But before that, the first games I got that weren't with the computer, some friend I met at like Starbase, which was like Space Camp Light, I went over to his house one day and he had all these games, and I thought they were awesome. So he was like, oh, here, I'll give them to you. And I was like, what? You'll give me these games? Dude, how much do these cost? He's like, I'm just going to copy the discs. I'm not giving you the original. And then at that point, I didn't think, but isn't that illegal? I thought, oh, games are free. It never even occurred to me that you had to pay for things for computers at that point.
Well, see, like, I kind of understood that, you know, games that came on floppy disks, you would just copy. Like, that's how you got Wolfenstein 3D. Everyone got Wolfenstein 3D.
Yep.
But games that came on CDs, it's like, oh, you can't copy that. I mean, and I was like, you could just copy the CD to the hard drive. We all understood how you could do that, but no one had a hard drive big enough to make that conceivable.
My hard drive was 540 megabytes.
Mine was 700 and something megabytes, so, but the OS took up too much space.
Remember, we knew someone who got a CD burner.
Oh.
Real early. It burned at 1x.
See, I was cool because I had a 4x CD-ROM. It could read at 4x.
Damn, I had a 2x.
Yeah.
So, of course, see, we go in leaps and we leapfrog past each other because I had the crappy 46SX and Scott had the awesome DX. But then I had the Pentium 200.
And then I got the Pentium 3 450 megahertz.
And then I got the Thunderbird gigahertz.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Which I still have.
And then I got the Athlon XP, which I still have. Anyway.
Yep.
The point is that, you know, after we got on the internet, our knowledges started to increase exponentially. I learned mad programming skills at summer camp and school and elsewhere.
Yep, my fiddling with serial cables turned into fiddling with giant networks at IBM.
So, anyone who thinks that we don't know about technology, I've been technologying and computering since kindergarten.
I would sit there on my 486 SX2 playing with, like, presentation-making software for hours.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff we did was games. I mean, I did a whole lot of playing of CD-ROM-based DOS games, like Mech Warrior 2.
I did a lot of
Doom.
writing stupid things in BASIC.
Yeah, but while doing those things, I was forced to learn about the computer. I mean, how am I supposed to be able, install things and configure sound cards and all that without learning about IRQs, DMA, hard drive space, partitions?
You kids are spoiled today. You realize before Sound Blaster, there was no sound on computers. You couldn't play sound.
Yeah, do you guys understand what DirectX does and what, SDL and all these other APIs do? Is that if I write a game, I can make that game play sound by using DirectX, Direct Sound. And that way, no matter what sound card your computer has, if that sound card is supported by Direct Sound, which every sound card in the universe is, pretty much, the sound will work. Without Direct Sound, back in the DOS days, if you wanted to have a game to have sound, that game had to know which sound card you had, and it had to have support specifically for your sound card.
And then, in the install, you had to go and specify the IRQs and DMAs, which were the interrupt requests and the direct memory access.
Yeah, and you either had to know them or you had to hope that the automatic detection worked.
It never worked.
On my computer, it worked all the time because my computer was awesome.
See, on a lot of computers, though, it would just crash. And in fact, the auto detection would usually say, if nothing happens in 5 minutes, it crashed. Don't use it.
Yep.
Because it would probe the hardware physically, and some hardware didn't like being probed.
No, some hardware did not like being probed.
In fact, I still remember my Sound Blaster. Oh my God, I had an
This is turning into the old DOS computer episode and not the where did you learn computer skills.
Yeah, I think I'll hold that off for another day because I have great stories about my old Advanced Wave Effects 32 sound
I have
card.
mad 486 tails.
Oh, and my friend Ken, who had the much vaunted Aw-64.
Whoa.
He had like the best sound card in the world, and I was so envious until now that I know more, I realized that we both effectively had the same sound card.
The point is that like a year before I got out of like my senior year of high school, I think it was junior year, I had a job and I saved up $1,000 and bought a computer and slowly added more and more stuff to it, and I had Windows 95B on there. And I started playing with Red Hat Linux, and I had my own 56K modem in my room with my own phone line and my own internet bill, and I was really doing some good stuff, and that's where I learned most of my shit. At least that's where I started to learn most of my shit.
I was looking at how to make bombs.
Well, I don't remember what the first thing I did in the internet was, but I do remember that I spent a lot of time on like Yahoo, Alta Vista, GeoCities, and I was either looking for games or making HTMLs and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
Because I learned how to make HTMLs and web pages before I had a computer with an internet connection.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was at summer camp and I learned HTML and C, and then I got home and then we got the 486. So that's, and then I think we had the 486, but then we got on the internet. We got AOL.
Yep.
So it was
I remember when
like,
someone explained to me what HTML was, and he basically said, oh, you just write text, like words, and then you have these tags that you stick around that tell the computer how to show those words. And I said, oh, that's easy.
It's really weird when I think about it now, because even pretty much up until like the second last year of high school, I didn't know. I wasn't like beyond the line of, now you know.
God,
it wasn't until I got that Pentium 3 that I really knew. So it's surprising like how much I learned at RIT, even though in my mind I knew just as much now as I knew at the beginning of RIT, except for what I learned in classes. But that's so not true.
Yeah.
I learned so many things at RIT.
The thing is, a lot of what we've learned wasn't from classes directly.
No, it wasn't. It was just from having computers.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned more from fiddling with my busted-ass computer here than I've learned in school.
Yeah, I learned most of my Linux stuff from just dealing with Gentoo for, God, it's like 4 years now almost. So many years of Gentooing and Ubuntuing and Linuxing.
But we don't want to go long.
No, we don't.
So stay tuned tomorrow when we'll talk in much greater detail probably about the origins of our video gaming ways.
Or maybe our role-playing and board gaming ways?
Oh, one of the two. I don't know. It's a mystery.
Maybe all right, we're going to either tomorrow is going to be an episode talking about our video game ways or our board and role-playing game ways. Go to the forum and vote.
And that was Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1037. 1537.
Geeknights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.
It seems like the companies here, you can break it down the same way. At the bottom end, you have Yahoo, who pretty much just openly collaborate, helping the Chinese find dissidents that they can then torture and kill or whatever they do to them. Then you have Google, who allows the censorship and does all the censoring that China wants, but on any time something is censored, Google says, hey, we censored something. And they only censor the Chinese one. Then there's Wikipedia. That is the news today. Wikipedia has given China the big double deuce and said, we're not going to censor shit for anybody, and you can take that however you want. China responded by banning Wikipedia from China.
Well, see, here's the problem, is that if there's no Chinese people on Wikipedia, then the Chinese Wikipedia won't be edited very much, and therefore won't have much information to be censored, and no one will see it. So it basically makes, they might as well not have the Chinese Wikipedia if they're not going to censor
Well,
it.
I think they blocked normal Wikipedia, too. That's the thing. Because there's... Now, the one thing I found interesting, and a lot of people on Slashdot pointed this out, was why doesn't China let Wikipedia do whatever it wants and just edit Wikipedia to talk about how great communism is? There are more people... The Chinese government can hire more people to edit it the way they want it than Wikipedia could have, preventing it from being edited.
But what Wikipedia can do is prevent it from being edited by China.
Yeah, but not long-term. There are no long-term protections in Wikipedia. There are short-term protections for things like abuse. Like, if 1 million people suddenly decide to change an article about something stupid, like they try to add bananas to an article.
Well, doesn't every IP address in China begin with, some range of numbers that they can just block?
Tor.
Yeah.
There are many ways around that.
But do you think... See, this is the thing. Governments like China don't seem...
It's Monday, September 11th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight we begin Origins Week, bringing you the origin stories of the fabled geekly interests of Rim and Scott. Let's do this!
So today, work was crazy. And usually work is nothing.
Really? So did you do work?
No. Well, I guess. I did do things with my body to help the company in a way.
What, did you move furniture around?
No, but I basically I get to work, and my plan today at work was to go in, play DDR at work. I had my DDR pad in the trunk.
Yeah, you had this crazy idea.
The hatch.
Yeah, bring in the DDR pad to work, which would be brilliant.
It would have been brilliant, except today, of all days, there was people at my work. Oh my God. What they were doing is they were taking the furniture out of the office and they're sending it somewhere, God knows where, and they're going to get new furniture, and hopefully after they get new furniture, they'll get new people, besides just me. But today I had to clear off computers from a bunch of desks so that they could take the furniture away.
So you didn't bring the DDR pad in?
I didn't bring DDR pad in because there's people there. They would have seen it.
So? You've done other things with your body before.
Yeah, but people weren't there seeing it. Anyway.
How do you know? How do you know there isn't some security camera that is in the ceiling that you don't know about?
Because I know.
How do you know?
I know.
You can make real tiny cameras.
I'm 100% sure. Anyway, then I had to go to my parents' house to fix their computer, which was mad broken. And let me tell you, this computer is crazy broken. Crazy broken. Like, you'll turn it on, and it'll work. Then you'll turn it on again, and you'll get a kernel panic right away about it'll say, like, the kernel tarball is in an improper compressed format. You'll reboot it to understand that Tor exists and that their citizens are using it. How are they going to know to use it for their advantage?
Of course, Germany recently has been attacking Tor.
Oh, yeah, they took a bunch of Tor servers.
Yeah, on the auspicious grounds that child pornography might be involved in some way. Therefore, we're taking all these people's computers.
Even though these computers don't actually have child pornography on them.
Not only that, but if their argument were, we're going to seize these computers, look at the logs, and track down the child porn, while I would disagree with parts of that on fundamental, freedom issues, at least it would make sense.
Here's the thing.
They're trying to do good, but here's the thing. There are no logs. Seizing those computers can do nothing because there's absolutely no way from seizing one computer to find out who connected to that Tor server. That's how Tor works.
Yeah. The thing is, what'd be cool is if I had some sort of Tor server and there was a way to tell from the logs who was a child pornographer or whatever.
Oh, I'd turn him in.
Yeah, I would have no problem just like setting up, here's an anonymous thing. Everyone can be anonymous on the internet, but I'll know if you're doing child porn. That's the only thing that will show up is if you're a child pornographer. Then your anonymity will be, destroyed. That way, child pornographers wouldn't be able to use it.
The problem here is just the collateral damage, because it seems like whenever governments try to tackle this problem of child porn, and while it is definitely a problem, it's a very bad thing. I wonder how widespread of a problem it is that the collateral damage of all these measures governments take to prevent it are worth it.
Well, here's what bothers me, right? Is that they're like doing all these things, to stop child porn and taking things down that are mostly used for non-child porn. I mean, I'm sure there's a torrent somewhere of a child porn. There has to be, just because the internet exists. But is enough for anything you're going to do. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I only got 512 megs of RAM, but to double that, add $50. So $250 plus a video card and you're set.
Anyway, the UPS is probably a good idea. I mean, we UPSified our entire house.
I'm beginning to think that's the problem because they had this really strange old ghetto power strip that was mad shady.
Why did you let them use that?
I don't know. I didn't really have much say in that matter. I pretty much just brought a computer to their house and it was plugged in.
And you didn't look at what it was plugged into?
In those days, I didn't pay much attention. So I'm going to replace their motherboard, CPU, and RAM. See what I can do with the old motherboard, CPU, and RAM. I mean, I bought this computer for them back in the day for $400, and they never gave me the $400. So it's kind of
you know what? They did help you, go to school and pay for most of your upbringing.
Whose side are you on here? That's what they say. Anyway, the point is that I'm going to fix this computer up, and computers are wicked cheap. And also, this computer is strangely broken. Woo!
Better call Randy. There's a ghost in there.
I know. It's a non-deterministic computer. What's the world coming to?
We better get a skepticality on it.
I know. It's craziness.
All right. So anyway, in the actual news, Wikipedia. Now, there's been a lot lately about how Google and Yahoo and Microsoft have been kowtowing in various ways to the oppressive regime in China.
Yeah, it seems like your choices are kowtow, which is looked down upon, but then you can do business in China where there's 1 billion people to pay you.
Yep.
Or you can not kowtow, which is good, but then 1 billion people in China. It's like, what's better? Not to influence those people at all or to influence them in a censored way. It's
Now, kind of like the way I always like to break up the way France, Britain, Spain, and Portugal treated natives they ran across.
Again, and it'll start uncompressing the kernel and then give a different kernel panic about not being able to mount the VFS.
Now, it seems like many of the computers you've given to your parents have always had problems, and you keep having to do things to them.
Yeah, and then, check this out. So I try to boot an Ubuntu CD on the thing, and it starts to boot the CD and then gives a kernel panic from a CD. I think the last computer they had, the IDE controller broke. And the one they have now, I'm pretty sure the IDE controller broke.
Now,
so I'm thinking that they have some sort of power problems, and I'm going to buy them a UPS because I ordered them a new motherboard, CPU, and RAM. By the way, the motherboard and CPU RAM I got them was a 1.6 gigahertz Sempron with 512 megabytes of RAM with a motherboard that has a built-in GeForce 6100 micro ATX, 64 bits processor, for $174.
That's faster than either of our computers.
That's faster than any computer that any of my friends own. Period. Hands down. And it was $174 for the motherboard, CPU, RAM, video card, sound card, network card, because it's all rolled into one.
So who was it in the forums who thought that building a $1,000 computer was a good idea?
I don't know, but they were dumbass. I mean, this thing, granted, this thing has an onboard video card, and it's a 6100, and the one in my computer is a 5900, and you're not going to play Half-Life 2 at really good speeds. I mean, it'll be barely playable. However, you can just, for a few $100, slap, a newer GeForce in the PCI Express slot, and you are good to go.
You could spend $500 on a video card and still be cheaper than that $1,000 computer.
Yeah, not only that, but, the Sempron, not the fastest processor, but 1.6 gigahertz 64-bit processor.